Hi, I'm Rachel, and I appreciate you listening to this faith talk about failing up. And I hope that I can encourage you in your own journey of faith. So I used to be an alcohol and drug counselor, and I worked with clients who struggled with addiction, with mental health, and who were in the criminal justice system. I loved my job. I loved working with vulnerable people who were learning to trust recovery, to trust treatment, and who were looking for a new way to live their lives. Unfortunately, I worked for many nonprofit agencies that were poorly funded, poorly managed, and were not supportive. I myself was vulnerable most of the time, dealing with challenging clients and not feeling emotional support that I needed from my supervisors. In July 2017, I was in the office on my own because my 3 coworkers all had vacation during the same week, so I was feeling overwhelmed and overworked. And I was typing my group notes, and I heard a voice say, "You need to stop working." So I stopped working, and I looked over my shoulder, but there was nobody there. So I went back to typing my notes, wondering what had happened. And on the way home, I was mulling over this experience, and I felt like a sense of peace wash over me. As Jesus promised, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." I had worked for 9 years in a field that I believe was my calling, with a high burnout rate. Most people leave after 5 years. So I went home, and after a lot of consideration and prayer, I quit my job, and I left the field. For the first 6 months, I stayed home, and I decompressed 9 years of secondary trauma, just letting it seep out of me. I was very vulnerable. I had given up a major part of my identity. I felt vulnerable and exposed, but I trusted the voice. Like the Apostle Paul, I believe that I am God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good deeds that God prepared in advance for me to do. As part of my early burnout recovery, I took up spinning, by which I mean indoor cycling, not doing things with yarn. I love spinning. It's a high-intensity, low-impact, cardio and strength-based workout. I love the loud, fast music. I love competing against myself, and I love the choreography. And I like doing it with a pack of people. And the best part is that most of the time the room is dark with just a few candles lighting the room. It's both invigorating and peaceful. And once I get into the zone, my mind frees up so that I can ponder and reflect. And over the years, I have found spinning to be a parable of my spiritual life of faith. For me, spinning and faith both require vulnerability, trust, and action. So let's define these elements before we dive into the parable. First, vulnerability. Brené Brown, whose work I deeply admire and she has been so helpful to me, defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And I'm sure there have been times in all of our lives when we have felt vulnerable. Next is trust, which I'm going to divide into 3 components based on the work of Fernando Flores. First of all, there is sincerity. Do you mean what you're saying in this moment? Secondly is competency. Do I believe that you can do what you're saying in this moment? And third is involvement. Do I believe that you are taking my needs into account? And finally, action. This is the behavior that expresses our desires and our choices and our values, beliefs. The basic equipment in a spinning class is the bike, cycling shoes, the instructor, and myself. As soon as I click my shoes into the pedals, the bike and I become one. We're like the foundation of the class. And in some ways, even though I'm feeling supported by my bike, I'm still feeling vulnerable. I'm still feeling a little exposed. Am I going to keep up? Is the teacher going to push me too hard? Am I going to be able to encourage the people around me who are also spinning? I have to trust for this to be successful. I have to trust that the bike is going to physically support me. I have to trust the choreography of the instructor, and that she knows that I can do what she's asking of me. And I have to trust myself. I know that I've done this before, and I can do it for just 1 minute and just 1 minute more. Spinning takes action. I have to show up for the class. I have to turn the resistance up and push harder. I have to move my feet at one pace and do upper strength training at a different pace. I have to listen intently, and I have to follow the choreography carefully. But what does this have to do with faith? I find it a great parable for my faith journey. And so the more I think about my faith when I'm spinning, the more spinning has become a component of my spiritual life. In the Bible, James says, "What good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but you don't show it by your actions? And can't you see that faith without good deeds is useless?" So I think of the bike as my faith, the thing that supports me when I click into it, very much like the Bible supports me when I read it and ponder and reflect on it. The Bible tells me everything I need to know about God, who I believe created and sustains this universe, of which I am a tiny part. And because we all struggle with such a vast concept, God sent Jesus, a human in the perfect image of God, so that we can relate better to him. So Jesus is key to my faith too. Without Jesus, I would probably just be sitting on my bike, reading my Bible, but not putting it into practice. Jesus is my instructor. I trust him. He is sincere when he tells me, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me." I trust his competency. As the Son of God, he had power to heal, forgive, and teach before he died, and how much more now in his resurrection. And I know and I trust deeply that he has my best interests at heart. Just when I'm getting tired in my spinning class, the instructors turn on the fans and they tell us to breathe. And this re-energizes me, just in the same way Jesus re-energizes me, when I'm beginning to think that maybe all of this is actually quite pointless. He sends a thought or a person or an event or a voice that re-energizes me. Jesus tells us, "I am leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart." To me, a life of faith requires vulnerability, acknowledging that I am not in control. It means I have to be open and humble enough to accept the guidance of Jesus Christ. It means living in the present so that I can be aware and mindful of his guidance. My faith also requires trust. Let's recall the 3 elements: sincerity, competency, and involvement. Do I trust that my best interests are being taken into account? Yes, yes, and yes. The Bible gives us countless examples of God's values and consistency, not only through the encounters with other human beings, but through the life of Jesus Christ. Lastly, my faith requires action. It is expressed through my behavior. And of course, I can easily express my lack of faith through my behavior when I choose not to be vulnerable, but to grasp back control of my life. Sometimes my actions show that I distrust Jesus. Since leaving the field of addiction counseling, I am slowly finding my way to using my skills to help others in their spiritual journeys, including offering Prepared to Preach workshops, to inspire spiritual growth within our churches, and to encourage different ways that we can reach out to our local communities. Of course, this new calling makes me vulnerable. I'm leading groups. I'm open to criticism and judgment. But I take the risk because I have faith that this is my work in Christ. When my spin instructors try to motivate us, they sometimes say it's better to fail up, meaning it is better for me to crank up that resistance and risk that my cadence is going to go slower, because it is better to try something new and slightly miss the mark than to never try at all. And so I remember this in my spiritual moments as I venture out into my new calling of serving Christ in our community. I am drawn to a practical, hands-on, social work type of preaching. A few years ago, I started the Beanie Project. I love knitting, especially in the winter, and so I knit beanies. And when I have enough, which could be 30 or 40, I call my friends and we make gift bags. And we make food, and we put in a pair of socks, and we put in a beanie, and we go downtown Portland, and we hand these out to our homeless population. Faith in action is not always big life-changing events, like quitting my job was. Sometimes it can be as simple as knitting beanies. So my appeal to you is this: be open to the vulnerability of faith. Trust in Jesus, in his sincerity, his competence, and his involvement in your life. Find some way to put your faith into action, even in a small way. But no matter what, stay on the bike. It is better to fail up. Thank you.